Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a beautiful day in Charleston, and yet you've chosen to sit in a dark theater. And that really warms my heart, because you chose to do that because you want to hear people talk and be involved in a conversation about culture, which I think is important. Welcome. This is one of our Spoleto Festival Jazz Talks, although I promise you we'll be talking about much more than jazz. Welcome to the Queen Street Playhouse, which has its own long history, and to that history we are now adding a place to hang out and hear jazz. So, for the past two evenings, and again this evening at 5 and 7, this beautiful harp behind me has been played by this beautiful woman, Brandee Younger. And you can hear that at 5 and 7. Next week, we'll have a quartet led by alto saxophonist Emmanuel Wilkins in this space. I am Larry Blumenfeld. Most of my life is involved in conversations about culture. When I'm not here, those spill out. Performances. And so thanks for being part of conversations about culture and the music that gives rise to those conversations. A couple days ago, Brandee visited the Allegro School, a charter school in North Charleston. And so these high school students, Brandee got her bachelor's in music in harp performance and music business at the Hart School of Music at the University of Hartford, her master's in harp performance from New York University. She's on the faculty of NYU and the New School College of Performing Arts. Please help me welcome Brandee Younger. All right, so I'm from Brooklyn. You're from Long Island.
It's Long Island.
Long Island. When you were growing up on Long Island, what was the first, you played and listened to so many kinds of music, what was the first music you remember really capturing your attention?
Probably like church.
What kind of church was it?
Baptist.
Baptist.
The hymns.
Were you singing in the choir?
Yeah.
You were?
All the jams.
And you had, what would the instrumentation be in that church?
Just, when I was young, it was like, I think it was just the organ. It wasn't until later that they added the drums and the bass. It got loud, and then all the old folks started complaining. Mm-hmm. But this still has bass and drums now. But yeah, I think at the time, it was really just my Aunt Bert playing organ.
Now, I remember once a long time ago, you told me about, I guess you probably were in your teens, and by then you're playing harp. Finding in a harp magazine a reader's poll. So yeah, tell us what that discovery was.
You mean the Harp Column magazine?
Yes, Harp Column magazine, which that's one magazine I don't know.
I was going to say, we all have to have our magazines.
Does it still exist?
Yeah.
Look, I'm a writer. Anytime anyone talks about a magazine, I'm thrilled.
We have the American Harp Journal, which is the official publication of the American Harp Society. Nerd alert. And then we have the Harp Column magazine, which is just harp across the board. And then we have like a Celtic harp publication. So those are the three main things. So this was Harp Column magazine. So I think you're referring to when I first saw Dorothy Ashby.
Yes, exactly.
I didn't know who she was, and I see all these squares on the cover, and I was like, oh, there's like one black person right there. Who's that? And that's when I was first able to connect a face to the name.
And did you seek out her music then?
Yep, but I think before then I had heard her play, but didn't know it was her. Stevie Wonder and the Songs in the Key of Life. If it's magic, that's her. And then also growing up listening to hip hop. I'm from New York, so you know hip hop. home, very proud of it, but listening to Pete Rock, who was really the first to start sampling her in like 1992-ish, hearing her on these tracks and not knowing who it was.
So, for the people here, who was Dorothy Ashby?
Dorothy Ashby was a incredible musician out of Detroit. She went to Cass Technical High School, which has the longest standing harp program in the United States. Her dad was
in Detroit.
Yep, in Detroit, still going strong. So you end up meeting a lot of musicians who aren't harpists that can play some harp because they went to the school. Alice Coltrane did not go to Cass Tech, even though there's always a fight on a thread on Facebook. But
we're getting deep in the woods.
I know. Okay, I'm back. So Dorothy Ashby, her father was a guitarist, Wiley Thompson. I say this because when you listen to her playing, a lot of it sounds like guitar-like. They're guitar-like voicing. Sometimes it sounds like a piano, sometimes it sounds like a guitar, and then sometimes it sounds like a harp. So it's really, really cool. But she had 11 albums as a leader that a lot of people don't know about, but she's also the harpist that you hear on all the classic records from the late 60s, 70s, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Bill Withers, that whole era. That's her harp.
Marvin Gaye?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was old enough to have had Songs in the Key of Life, when it was new, be a big deal for me in high school. And yeah, so that, I guess I heard Dorothy Ashby then. And Dorothy Ashby's music now has insinuated itself into your career. So can you talk a little bit about just how you've dealt with her music?
Yeah, so probably when I started to branch out of orchestral work and started to work with bass and drums and sort of, adding a band element, I just noticed, and especially in the harp community, how undersung Dorothy Ashby was and Alice Coltrane, but really Dorothy Ashby. And it's like, there's all this stuff. Why don't people really celebrate her? And so I kind of went on a mission to make sure that every performance I did in some kind of way paid homage to both her and Alice Coltrane. So even though I've got a ton of my own music, I'd always make sure there's one of their pieces on the set. Because there's just so much, and I didn't feel like she was being respected in the way that I think she should have been.
Now, you talked about, say, for instance, Pete Rock. He used Dorothy Ashby as one of the sonic elements, and part of his art is combining a whole bunch of sonic elements, and we don't even know where they're coming from, unless we know. But now you've kind of turned that around, because now you have Pete Rock working on a Dorothy Ashby tune.
So this is actually quite funny. I'll tell you guys this. So to give you some context, I just did a new record, and I recorded some of Dorothy Ashby's music that has never been recorded before, and I was so thrilled about it. I wanted to make sure that I worked with people who shared a special kinship with her. And the first person that came to mind was Pete Rock, but I was like, am I going to get him to say yes? So I'm like, hi, it's Brandee. And I told him about it. And after a lot of arm twisting, he agreed to do it. And do you know what was funny? He started sending me tracks of his.
Really?
I was like, no. I'm sending you the track. So yeah, he kept sending me these tracks. And I was like, these are great, but I have the track. Could you work on what I sent you? So yeah, it was interesting, yeah. And he's like, so what do you want me to do with it? I said, do what you want to do with it.
Because now it's not Dorothy serving his art, it's him serving Dorothy's art.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. I should have mentioned up front, there is a new recording, Brand New Life.
Yes.
That if you were to come to one of Brandee's performances here, out in the lobby, who would we find at the merch table?
Mommy and Daddy selling the merch.
And who I've told clearly they did something right, a few things right. And your dad gave me some advice on how to get my 14-year-old son to return to his music practice. He said, don't push. So we need to talk about Alice Coltrane, but I want to back up a little bit. So when you were studying harp, all right, you started, how old were you when you first picked up a harp?
Like
Or
11-ish.
Didn't pick it up, but you sat before it.
11-ish.
When you got to a conservatory, were you thinking, I'm going to be, as many harpists, I'm going to be a harpist in a symphony orchestra?
No, I went to college for the scholarship, and I didn't think I would play after school. That's why I did the double major. I figured I'd pursue the business end of things, but as we know, the business flipped on upside down at that time. This was like 2001, 2-ish, when Napster came, and then everything changed.
Funny thing, I went to college on a scholarship. I thought I was going to be a marketing person in the arts business, and
Look
I
at
took
you
a
now.
left turn too. And here we are. But now at Hartford, I know you encountered the great saxophonist and educator Jackie McLean, known as Jackie Mac. Before that, were you very interested in jazz?
Yes, I played trombone in high school. Don't laugh.
I didn't laugh, but I might have laughed. No.
And I was in marching band.
Mm-hmm.
But when marching band season was not on, we had concert band and we had jazz band. And my teachers were awesome, and they had us doing all the competitions and whatnot. So I was definitely already interested, but not really successfully executing it on the harp because the mechanics of the instrument make it tough.
But you were, I was around that same age in my life. I was playing trumpet. So you were listening to jazz.
Yeah.
So now at University of Hartford, Jackie McLean established what is one of the great jazz programs at a university. How did he and that connection take shape and affect you? So
upon auditioning, actually the first person I met at Hart from the jazz department was Nat Reeves, the bassist.
Mm-hmm.
I was teaching bass at the school, and I was going to audition, and he walked in. They were like, hey, like we've known each other for years. So it was already this super welcoming energy. But once school started, I met Jackie McLean in the hallway. And he was always welcoming every time I saw him. So he said, look, you want to come to class, come to any class. Come to my history class, come to master class, come to ensembles. Just come and knock on my door anytime, which me and my roommate always took advantage of that. Sometimes just stand outside the door and just wait for him to come out and be like, hey. So he was always welcoming in the way that the other department in the school that I was a part of wasn't as warm. That's the word I'll use, warm.
Right, and I mean, I guess you were sitting in those classes, not playing.
Correct.
Just
I'm no fool.
Just learning things.
Yeah.
Okay, as a young black woman playing harp in a conservatory, what was that environment like?
Awkward in orchestra. Well, for one, never mind black, it's just harp. And there's one of you, and there's like 25 violinists. So you're already singled out.
Right.
Just by the nature of your instrument. And God forbid you come in wrong or miss an entrance. It's like the end of the world. So that was one discomfort, just being alone. I'm a middle child. I can keep myself entertained. But I don't like to be alone. But then also, in orchestra, I think there was like maybe two other black people in the orchestra. That's it.
So the first time I encountered you and heard you play was in 2007 when Ravi Coltrane, the saxophone, I should give a little background. So last year, Brandee was here performing at the Cistern Yard in a wonderful presentation by Ravi Coltrane, the saxophonist, which was a tribute to his mother, Alice Coltrane, and to her music. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with John Coltrane. Just make a little noise if Alice Coltrane and her music is something that's familiar to you.
Yes, the best.
Okay. John Coltrane Ravi Coltrane was very, very young, around 3 when John Coltrane passed away. So he's primarily raised by Alice on Long Island.
Long Island.
And so I first heard you in 2007 when Ravi asked you to perform at a memorial when Alice passed, which was 2007. tell us a little bit about how when Alice and her music entered your awareness. When did you first learn?
So first of all, are my parents here? Okay, good. All right, so, because I don't want to get in arguments and...
We might be streaming this.
Oh.
No, say it. We're not streaming this.
My dad got me a CD.
It's our secret.
You know, because in interviews I say, my dad got me a CD, and then my mom's like, oh, I did nothing. And then there's this whole thing. So I try to just use...
We're going to have a separate talk about
use
that.
the term parents instead of one or the other. But in real life, my dad had got me the CD, and he said, just check this out. So that, it was do you remember the compilation Priceless Jazz?
Yes.
Yes. It was the Priceless Jazz Alice Coltrane. So the first two tracks were Blue Nile and Turiya and Ramakrishna, which are my favorite songs to this very day. Mm-hmm. So that was really my introduction to her music. And I was like, wow, it's really cool what she's doing with the Blue Nile, what she's doing with the glissandos and the sounds that she's making. And this is cool. And I want to try this one day. And this was before college. So I think one of the first questions I asked Jackie McLean was, do you know how I can get in touch with Alice Coltrane? Instead of oh my gosh, I love you so much, I was like, how can I get in touch with Alice Coltrane? So it was that CD probably that, for sure, that introduced me to her music.
And did you get in touch with her?
No, and this is when I'm at the schools, I sound old. We had the internet, but it wasn't like today.
You didn't Google everything.
You couldn't just Google and just get in touch with everyone like you can today.
And it would be much later on when you connected with Ravi. But what did that music, Alice's music, represent to you when you first encountered it?
It was like this, the harp, it can fully function, completely function outside of its traditional, outside of an orchestra. It can stand on its own, not just as a solo instrument, but with a proper rhythm section. And I think I had heard some harpists do some things with bass and drums before, but it's very easy, just for the nature of the instrument, it's very easy for it to sound hokey.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
And in trying to...
The glissando is used in very hokey ways.
Yeah, she totally made the glissas very soulful.
Well, they were serving a spiritual purpose. Yeah. Right? I mean, that is, the short story, Alice. I mean, Ravi had told me about, he'd come home and, he wanted to watch reruns on TV, but his mom Alice was in the living room playing organ or piano, working on bhajans, which are like Hindu hymns. And she went on to move to California and begin an ashram that had thousands and thousands of followers, and devoted herself to spiritual music. But so was that, since you began in a different kind of spiritual music, was that a connection? Did you have a spiritual connection to that music?
Yeah, so I actually think one of the things that makes Alice Coltrane's music really special, very fancy word, is that it's combining the traditional Indian classical music, the gospel. She grew up in Detroit at
she played in church.
Baptist church. So gospel, and then also bebop. She studied with Bud Powell in Paris, and she learned so much. Her big brother was a bassist, Ernie Farrow. So she had so much to pull from that she put into her music, which is what makes it different than anything you've ever heard. Right.
And she had worked with Farrow, who you worked with, who was probably the closest to that essence of John Coltrane's music. And I mean, sometimes I think about Ravi Coltrane grew up in this home where his mother was on that one path, and his father had just recorded A Love Supreme, which is one of the best-selling jazz albums ever, but also one of the most clearly spiritual jazz albums ever. And then Alice's music has had this other life too, right?
Yeah, and she wasn't making music to sell records.
No,
not at all.
Although in the 70s she did sell records.
Yeah, I mean, Journey in Satchidananda was probably her biggest record, that hit people, and it hit people that were like, oh, yoga? A whole new world.
Now, when you play Turiya and Ramakrishna, or Rama Rama, which played so beautifully here. How do you interpret it for your trio? How do you put that together?
When I first decided to play Rama Rama, Rama Rama was recorded with vocals, organ, and percussion. That's it. So it's like, how do I recreate something like this? And I think I've said, straight eighths, but make it Hindu. What? Mix it up, and of course, and that was many, many years ago. Of course, over time, it just starts to mesh into, playing with certain people changes things, by the way. Everything doesn't sound the same. If it was a different bass and different drummer, Rama Rama wouldn't sound the same. So a lot of it is actually just knowing and having a connection with the people that you're working with and being able to read each other's minds, that part. Read my mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about these people you're playing with and this trio, because it's interesting to me. Rashan Carter, bassist, Alan Mednar, the drummer. What you do here, you're all really, it's not a bass and drums supporting a harp. You're all really, it's collaborative in all ways possible, including just sonically. Can you talk about what you look for in the sound and in the relationship with your bandmates? So
there's like 10,000 answers to that, so I'll try to not give you 10,000.
We got a little time.
I come from I excelled in college and grad school in chamber music. Orchestra, I wanted to run.
Right.
But chamber music, it's everyone has a voice, and everyone's voice is important. I approach this the same way. I'm not like, this is my band and you guys support me only. No, it's like, let's work together. And the recording of Turiya and Ramakrishna, the way that it's recorded, you can hear the bass, you can hear the drums, and the piano. They're all on equal planes. And I really love the interplay between the three instruments. And so actually, I bit off of that song and I wrote, wow, we're not recording this, right? No, okay. I told everyone. I wrote a song and had the opportunity to record it with Ron Carter on my last album. It's called Beautiful is Black. It got nominated for a Grammy. But when I wrote it with Turiya and Ramakrishna in mind, in the way that the three voices interplayed. And it was funny, I didn't want to say to Mr. Carter in rehearsal, remember in 1968 when you recorded, can you think about that? I didn't say anything. I just, here's the lead sheet, I hope you can read it, correctly. And Alan played drums on that record. And and I was nervous because I've never played with Ron Carter before. And I didn't think he was going to say yes to playing on my record, and he did. So I was nervous. I'm sure Alan was nervous because as a drummer, bass and drum, that relationship is super, super important, and it's very easy for the bass player to be tough on the drummer. So I think we were both, pooping bricks.
And Ron is a master of time. So
yeah. Brandee, do you want that A flat right there? Oh, no, not where I wrote it. I'm sorry, But just having a good relationship with the folks that you're playing with makes all the difference. So even though the three of us are playing on stage for the audience, when we're done, we eat together. We get up in the morning, we go to breakfast together, we take a walk. So there's a relationship between the band that I think really serves the performance.
You said so many things that are interesting to me there, and especially about chamber music, this is a festival that has big and long-standing and very important chamber music series, and to me, the relationship between the ensembles that I would present in a jazz series and chamber music are exactly as you described. And as a matter of fact, all right, most people, Ron Carter's throughout the entire history of jazz, but a lot of people would know him as a member of Miles Davis's great mid-60s quintet. And to me, that band is one of the great examples of American chamber music. And it sort of works the way a chamber ensemble works.
Everyone has a part.
Everyone has a part. Those parts interrelate. They all, and in an equal way. I feel like when I hear your trio here, the drums are very important in terms of tone and harmony, right?
Yeah, and I don't want too much cymbal because then it starts to interfere with the tone of the harp. It's interesting, those frequencies up there. So we have to think about all of these things, listen back, like, hey, this was terrible, but this was really cool. Mm-hmm. Can we get a warmer cymbal sound there? Can you support me more here?
Now, you kind of casually mentioned that Grammy nomination. But
I don't usually talk about
No, let's talk about what category it was in, because you were the first Black woman ever nominated for a Grammy in instrumental composition, which, first of all, well, to me that says something interesting about the history of this award and the juries.
It's like, really, guys?
But it also, that's you getting recognized. Everyone, nice to get nominated for a Grammy, nice to win a Grammy, but that's recognizing you as a composer.
Yeah.
What did that mean to you?
I was at school teaching when the nominations came out, and I kept seeing all these text messages, and I was like, oh my God, did something happen? Like, I'm thinking there's an emergency. So when I saw, congratulations, I thought it was the force majeure. I thought it was my last album. I didn't know, and I was like, oh, what category? But I never just mention it, but the reason I did mention it is because you asked that question about the interplay between the three, and how I jacked that from Turiya Ramakrishna for this particular composition. And I didn't expect that. And it's a ballad. Usually I like boom, 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 boom. So the ballads, I'm like, snoozy. But I felt there was something really beautiful about that one. And I guess someone else did too.
It is. Okay, so Tuesday, this festival will present Henry Threadgill, who several years ago won a Pulitzer for music, which is basically honoring a composer of any genre. But it's not, I'm old enough to remember a time in my career where people didn't talk about any quote-unquote jazz musicians as a composer. Not even maybe Ellington or Mingus, where it's more common now. So does it give you a different idea of your road ahead when someone says, yes, you're a composer and we're honoring your, not just you're a great musician?
The Society for American Composers, they reached out for me to be a part of a panel, and I was like, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm a musician. But then I realized, just because you didn't go to school for composition doesn't make you not a composer. I guess everyone comes to things in their own way. Can write Mary Had a Little Lamb and change it up, and there are just levels to it.
And there are many different ways that musicians put their music together, especially in the traditions of Black music.
Absolutely, which was, that was an oral tradition.
Yeah, in many instances. So, if I read a bio, or if I'm in some marketing, if you were in a marketing department somewhere, it's like Brandee Younger, she's involved in hip hop and works with rappers. She, plays with jazz masters and, plays jazz compositions. She's studied at a conservatory. You're working all these genres. But do you see them as one continuum of Black music or one continuum of musical universe?
I do. And for a long time, I kept my world separate. And it wasn't until I started to do this with it that things started to just settle in a way that felt natural,
See, it's a good thing you didn't go into marketing, because they don't like to do that. But as a musician, well, do you feel like, since we're of different generations, I feel like I've seen a sea change in that audiences, festivals like this, can really tear down some of those walls. Do you feel like that's a change that's happening?
Yes, but every festival is not Spoleto.
No.
For real, though.
Yeah. But in terms of you traveling around dealing with audiences, do you feel like younger audiences are more predisposed to not think about those categories?
I do think so. Whenever I run into the wall, because I don't put a word before harpist. I always just refer to myself as a harpist. It's always the older writers that want to put a.
What are you talking about?
I'm just saying, and I'm like, hey, could you just put harpist? I don't make a big deal out of it, but I'd rather it not be there. And the younger writers don't do that.
Right.
I did notice that, and I appreciate it.
Well, you said when we were at the school at Allegro, you said a couple things that were really interesting to me.
You're really paying attention, huh?
I paid attention.
I was talking to the kids. I was trying to meet them.
I had my little pad out.
Oh,
That's
boy.
what I do. You said you're trying to make the harp fit into places where it doesn't. And actually, what I thought was really beautiful, you said you wanted the harp to have a different life in music.
Yeah.
So what is that for your child, the harp? What is that life you want for them?
It's what it's like finally becoming now at my ripe age. You know, I've been working, I put a lot of work in, bringing the harp down flights of stairs to record in someone's mom's basement to make sure that there's harp on said track, you know? But yeah, I just think it'll be cool when it's not like, oh, a harp, but that you look at it in the same ways you look at a drum set or a bass. Life goals. Normal.
Do we have harpists? Any harpists in the audience? Meaning it can fit in any context.
Yes.
Are there, when you're playing in a quote unquote, this is a jazz trio setup.
It's okay. You don't have to be afraid to use the word now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
But if you're playing in a fairly traditional jazz ensemble setup or a pop band setup, are there specific challenges to how your instrument can work in there?
It's a drag. That's the worst part. Sound, and the drums are naturally, they're going to win.
Right.
They're going to win. And the bass too. And the bass players, they want to not just hear it, they want to feel it. And they
Right.
just like turn it up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I play the harp, guys. So please try not to kill me. So that is the biggest challenge outside of
You mean that the
music.
sound is more delicate?
Yeah. I'm the least sound producing instrument of the band. And add a horn, forget about it. Or a piano, keyboard.
But then otherwise, you've got all the notes a piano has, right?
We have all the notes. They're placed a little bit differently.
And they're harder to execute.
Yes.
But I mean, are there there are certain kinds of music that challenge a guitarist to fit in, or I remember when Randy Weston, the great pianist who once performed here, played with Gnawa masters from Morocco. It was hard for the piano to fit into what they did with their detuned instruments. But
Yeah.
is there anything other, in terms of technically that makes it more challenging for you?
Absolutely. Like, you're not going to hear me try giant steps because the harmonic movement is happening so quickly. Actually, Gary Bartz hired Dorothy Ashby to play on giant steps on his album Love Affair. And he did say that she was like, he said, just jump in where you can, jump out, do what you need to do, jump back in. And it's a really beautiful, beautiful recording. And it's not very fast. It's not like the Coltrane version.
Did you go back? I mean, when you heard If It's Magic on Stevie Wonder's album, which you played so beautifully that first night.
Thanks. I'll play it again tonight.
And actually, if you hear it, then go back and look at Stevie Wonder's lyrics because they're really gorgeous. But when you heard that the first time, you had no idea that was Dorothy Ashby or who that was. You heard a harp. Later on, did that song mean something different to you?
Yeah, and I wasn't going to record it this is on the latest record. I wasn't going to put it there, but I was like, I have to put it here. I heard a bootleg of her playing it at the Detroit Institute of the Arts.
Really?
You can't get this on the Googles. But she played it solo. And she plays the intro and she pauses and she goes, I did this with Stevie on Songs in the Key of Life. Just like that, like just Stevie, like we go way back. And And she played the most beautiful solo version. So what I recorded on the record is sort of, it's not a verbatim takedown, but it's definitely inspired by that solo version.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a really beautiful tune. And the story goes that, I think I mentioned that Stevie Wonder had asked.
You did? I didn't know that.
A few other harpists, including Alice Coltrane, to record this with her. And of course, the classical harpists were just like yelling at him, like, no, this is not good for harp. But then at the recommendation of Bill Withers and Alice Coltrane, he called Dorothy Ashby, and she came in and watched him on the piano and came in the next day with the part. And she's been known to do that more than once, I've heard.
But it is kind of amazing that here's this name, Dorothy Ashby, of this musician who had an important body of work, and she's sort of like this Zelig figure. She shows up in all these popular songs, and most people wouldn't know her name.
Right.
I know you play some of her you've recorded her compositions, you play some. What can you tell us about her composing, her music? Because to me it sounds distinctive in the way that like a Wayne Shorter tune sounds distinctive. Like, oh, that doesn't sound like someone else's music.
Well, like there's like her style of playing, and then there's her tunes.
Right.
And one thing I noticed, so she also had a theater company based out of Detroit called the Ashby Players. She wrote all the music for the plays, and her husband John Ashby wrote the plays. And I noticed that she would recycle a lot of the songs from the plays for her album. So you can hear on Afro Harping, which is a 1968 album on the Cadet label, she recorded Games, for example, was a piece that she wrote, and that's from one of her plays, Game. What I noticed from seeing her compositions is that they're written very much of the time. They read like a traditional jazz standard. And in recording this record, that's what I noticed a lot with the original charts, and the challenge for me was trying to make it not sound like 1959.
In that it has like a certain kind of a head.
Yes. So her style of writing was very of the time.
Now, I know last night after you were done here, you came over to the Cistern Yard to hear this fantastic band led by pianist Chris Davis called Diatom Ribbons. That includes the drummer Terry Lynn Carrington. Now, Terry has had this magnificent project that is really just growing along the lines of, she calls it gender justice, and she uses a mantra saying jazz without patriarchy. And it has many facets. One facet is she published a book of 101 compositions that jazz musicians can play, a real book in the terms of the jazz musicians, all by female composers. And she's trying to highlight this somewhat hidden or ignored or suppressed history, not just of female instrumentalists like Alice, who have played an important role, but also female composers. I know you're involved in one aspect of that next jazz legacy. Can you talk a little bit about how that works and what that sort of a project means for you?
Well, first, shout out to Terry Lynn Carrington for winning a Grammy for the record. She recorded a collection of the songs from the book. Including mine. Yeah. Yes. Mine was on there. But yeah, so she recorded a collection from the book, and that just won a Grammy, which was really, really exciting. Mm-hmm. I mean, not her first Grammy, but I was like, hey, my song's on there, which was really fun. But through New Music USA, she has created this Next Jazz Legacy program, where the idea is it's for young female or non-binary identifying musicians that are like not right out of school but young. Like I think it's 18 to 35 is the window, but the idea is not that you just finished school and want a gig. The idea is that you've been working and you just need a bit of a boost.
Developing artist.
Mm-hmm. So you submit your application, you submit your recordings, and then you list who you want your mentors to be in an ideal world. I mean, they only have to be alive, right? That's the stipulation. And you choose them. So last year, I think someone chose like Wayne Shorter and Esperanza Spalding. I mean, literally, it's like the world is your oyster. Wow. And with the mentors, you might think, well, they're going to say no. Terry Lynn has such an incredible relationship with so many people that just off of it being her thing, most people are like, absolutely. And I am on the advisory board of New Music USA, but I've got a clear view of this now because I am a mentor for one of the students. And Terry Lynn said, this person wants you to be her mentor. And each person, I don't want to say student because this sounds like, each mentee gets 2 mentors. Oh. One mentor has to hire you for 6 gigs. The other mentor is called your creative mentor, where I guess you go to for like advice and just, you know, big sis. I took a risk. I called my mentee for my album release after never hearing her, never working with her.
Who's your mentee?
Her name is Tashiana Mayfield. She's a singer from Texas. And when Terry Lynn, you know, said this person wants you to be her mentor, I was like, this is like a grown woman. She's like my age, and you know, and she's like, she is your age, Brandee, but you have more experience, so you can help her, you know. So I was like, all right, you know, whatever. And then I called her for my album release, which is a risk, and she was just incredible. I just called her for Atlanta Jazz Fest last week, and I'm calling her for Tiny Desk and PR, and she's like, oh my gosh, my life, you know. But just seeing how helpful it is just to have someone give you a boost, how it changes other aspects of your life. Like all of a sudden, I gotta start working out because I'm gonna be on camera, and you know, all the things that when you kind of are maybe stuck where you live working and you feel like you're not getting a chance because jazz is a boys club and no one's calling you, it can be really discouraging. So I think that this program that Terry Lynn has created is just incredible, and I wish it was around when I was younger.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because it's not that long ago that it was a very big deal. Other than a singer or maybe a pianist, it was a very big deal that a female instrumentalist would be on a gig at all, let alone be the leader, although we could rattle off many names. So does it feel like to you that there's a different climate around that now? You
know, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, no, truth.
When there was like a year or so where festivals started to like boast 50% female-led artists, and I'm like, how long is it gonna last? You know, because everyone gets excited for a moment. But I also think that, like you kind of mentioned, younger musicians don't think that way. So Joel Ross's bassist is a woman. Like he doesn't think of her as a woman, he thinks of her as a bass player. Right. You know, and it's just, they just don't think in the same way. So if I'm playing in Joel Ross's band, I'm not thinking of myself as a, you know, and same thing, I've played with Micaiah McCraven for years. I'm the only girl in the band, but we've known each other for years. But I think that as festivals and venues see, like, oh, there's 2 girls in that band. Oh, they have their own music.
Right.
You know, we just played at the Dakota, and the guy said, you know what, Brandee, I didn't know who you were. I'm sorry until you came here with Micaiah's band. You know, and he apologized. It's like, you don't have to apologize. It's fine. It's fine. But yeah, I think a lot of people so far are sticking to their guns.
Were there female musicians other than Terry Lynn who were mentors to you or examples to you?
My main mentors were Antoine Roney and Ravi Coltrane. I don't know about the tenor saxophone thing. I have no idea. But they were my biggest mentors because in jazz, you know, it's a boys' club. Now with classical music, there were some black female players like Akua Dixon, for example, who doesn't even know she was a mentor to me and taught me so much because we were on some sessions together early on. So in that respect, you know, and Akua is such a huge, like musically, she's so diverse.
Yeah, because you refer to her classically, and she does work in the classical sphere. But to me, she's actually a real channel of jazz in that world.
Yeah. But even just when I was younger, we were on a session together, and she walks in the session with like a floor-length mink on. She's like, I bought this with my residuals from the session I did with Aretha. And I was like, excuse me, you know? But yeah, just watching how she moves and how she navigates these spaces that are male-dominated, super, super helpful for me.
Okay, so it's very dark in here. I can not see all of you that well, but I wanted to see if anyone had a question for Brandee, and if you do, you can just say it out loudly. Or now that we have more light, you can raise your hand. Okay, go for it.
Not being a musician myself, I'm just curious, what is special to you about the harp, its sound quality or your ability to do different things with it?
So I've been asked to repeat. So the question is, what's different about the harp and its sound quality?
I think that one of the real cool things about playing harp that no one thinks about is we make the sound directly with our fingers. There's no hammer in between, like on a piano. There's, you blow into a wind instrument, it's got the wind has to travel. We make direct contact. We make sound with direct contact, which also instantly creates a vibration through your body because you got this big tree trunk leaning on you. And so there is this special, sounds very cliche, healing quality. Although I don't feel healing when I'm playing hard things, but the sound of it alone, especially when I don't have to overplay, is really special. And you literally feel it. I know that sounds so otherworldly, but it's true.
All right, now help me here.
Yeah.
47
strings and 7 pedals.
7 pedals, okay. And then anytime you want to change key, you've got to, like an organist, work the pedals. Yeah, too many things at once.
Tell me about it. So there's this one song, we did it last night. I didn't say this on the microphone because oh my gosh. So Charleston, you guys you can make noise if you love it. You can make noise if you hate it. It's okay. Be vocal, be comfortable. I was thinking about how music is to be experienced, right? You don't want to just have an imaginary wall between the stage and the audience. So for us, we feed off of audience energy. And when there's none, we work in overtime. But there's this one song, I could never have an adult beverage before playing it because there are so many pedals and just one off creates a domino effect. So yeah, it's tough down there.
And how does the instrument adjust to change when you do the pedals?
So you move you move the pedal up and it goes flat, which is against music. And then middle is natural and down is sharp. So there's a pedal for every note.
And then it's doing what to the right?
It's pinching the string.
Okay. Do you find, since you mentioned that whole audience dynamic, because if a saxophonist walked out here with a drummer and a bassist, I think people in their body and in their mind would have one. Do you find that just the presence of a harp makes people... Does it?
Part of it, but yeah, the one difference with a saxophonist and a singer, they're right there. And they can look into your eyes. We're hiding behind these big old pieces of furniture. So it is a little bit harder to have that direct, which is why I do talk in between the pieces, other than to give context to the music. But yeah.
Anyone else have a question? Okay, say a couple. Start with you.
Okay. Hi. Thank you so much for this talk. I'm learning and being filled so much. But I want to know your experience with maybe band leadership or just your process in bringing recorded music to the band and live.
Good question. Thank you so much.
Question about band leadership and what's it like to bring music to a band and lead a band.
Band leadership is no easy feat. Let me tell you that. Because you have to think about being able to be with the same people in close quarters, day after day, 4 a.m. lobby calls. So for one, you just want to make sure that you work with people that are cool. That's one, right? Because you can replace a drummer, right? You can So the people matter. But in terms of just learning music, if I have a recording of something already, which I seldom do, by the way. I mean, I might make something on solo harp and I go, can we play this? First of all, he's gonna say, do you have a chart? So, no. And I have to write it out. And I'll write it out and I'll give it to him. And then we'll just play through it and play through it and play through it. It's different if I know exactly what I want ahead of time. If I know exactly what I want, and I don't know how to use Logic or GarageBand or Pro Tools, so I can't even mock up recordings ahead of time. I'm like dinosaur age. So if there is something that exists and I know exactly what I want, it's much easier for them to execute it because what I want exists. But when it's in my head, that's when who you're working with makes all the difference, because I'm like, can you read my mind a little bit? Or they just know my tendencies from music that I've written in the past and things that I do on stage. Because when you get nervous, sometimes you just do things that you didn't intend to do. And it happens all the time, but they catch it, sort of like baseball, you know. Does that answer your question?
The way you answered it, I actually resonate with that type of style. Like, can you read my mind? Like, I feel like
You know, you can't do the mind reading thing with the guys too soon. You gotta work together for a while, and then they start to just pick up. But in the beginning, if you can be as clear as you want, but also knowing how to deal with people. You can't just say, that's wrong. Well, why don't we try it this way? Helps teaching too, try to like word things nicely to the students, you know.
So I have a sort of related question about that band dynamic, because, you know, sometimes people say, oh, jazz, it's like democracy because everybody plays their own part, which is true. But the way that you work in this band, where you're literally creating the form of the tune and things can change each night, you want to lead, but there's a certain special kind of empathy that needs to happen. That not just to be nice, but to actually just get the music, right?
It develops over time. You can tell when a band has not been playing together for a while, or you can tell, you can tell when there's one different person in the band. But empathy, that's probably the perfect word. Alan has a lot of empathy. Sometimes I don't know. Harp is, so not growing up, but once I got out of school and I would meet all these older jazz musicians, they would always say, oh, I know a harpist used to play at the Village Gate on Tuesdays, you know, she could play changes, but her timing was off. We always hear about harpists and their timing being off, and I'm like, you guys don't understand. Right. We like touch the string and it plays. So I had to practice playing behind the metronome to avoid rushing. You know, time is a thing. I have good time in my heart. But the hands do something different, and so he's very, very empathetic. But it took a long time to get to a place with the right people to really have that special connection. It didn't happen right out of college, I tell you that.
Now, Brandee does have to, she's doing 2 concerts later, so we can probably do one more question.
I won't be so long-winded.
You've been very patient, man, with the baseball cap.
Prejudice aside, and in terms of degree of difficulty, how would you rate the harp in terms of both learning it and playing it?
The harp,
like,
degree of difficulty.
Like 1 to 10?
Yeah,
sure.
That'd be good.
9.
That harp.
Yeah, we have to create an even sound from we only use 8 fingers. Create an even sound for one bling chord or one bring chord. That's hard in itself, and then you add the harmonic part of it, and then you don't want your nails hitting the string every single time. It's a lot to think about just to get a decent sound out. You guys hear the glisses all the time, which is what people think harps can only do. That's the easy part, you know, bring, but that also hurts because then you have a blister afterward.
How long are your fingers good for?
Well, I've seen plenty harpists in their 80s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, arthritis and all. Nancy Allen from the New York Phil, she said that she has to play every day. She said, if I don't play, my arthritis kicks in. Right. That was inspiring. I was like, really? Okay,
And
great.
then you even have the responsibility of you need to stop the
You have,
sound.
yes, you don't have any, like, pianists have
Yeah,
a
they-
dampening pedal. We don't have that. Everything, you got to do it. You play Bach, Bach, you're muffling as much as you're playing so that the harmonies don't bleed. It's a drag.
Now, it sounds like a lot of work. It sounds very laborious and hard, but I promise you, if you were here at 5 and 7, you'll see how effortless it appears and sounds.
Till you see me looking like I'm
And-
tripping.
And so please help me. You've been so generous with your time and your thoughts. Please help me thank Brandee. Thank you for talking about culture.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
And,
it.
keep talking.
And you can stay in touch on the Instagram. I answer the questions when I'm on the plane.
Okay.
It's the perfect
Thank
time.
you very much. I should mention, I'm doing another talk on Monday at 3:30 with Pulitzer Prize winning composer Henry Threadgill. That will be at the Riviera Theater, but that's also free to attend. So if you want, come back for that. Thank you.